Folks, I want to tell you a little bit about us and the current offers that you should know about, okay? Now, I've been in business as of the 1st of January, 26 years, offering these kinds of programs to folks. I've worked with a lot of people. I've helped a lot of people retire, so I've learned a lot. And it's not like I just began last month. So you get the advantage of all that experience. Helping people plan, really requires the experience. You can't just read the pages when you're helping somebody. You got to really know more than that. You got to know more than the topics. Okay, so that's me. I've been at it a long time. All right. Now, to learn more about us, if you go on our website, Game Plan for Retirement, you'll be able to access various information and podcasts and so forth that have gone through YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. There's you can just access it. It's really easy, and topics that you can access if you want to look at those, and then maybe you want to call us afterwards, okay? Or maybe the answers are right there. But in any case, that's our Game Plan Retirement is our website. Been our website for a long time. And so that's that. I want to give you a couple ideas. If you are 70 years old and you've got $100,000 in rollover from IRAs and so forth, or $100,000 in savings that you want to use for retirement, at this moment in time, I can get you 8.64%. So in other words, for every 100,000, it would be $8,640. That's 8.64%. That's a pretty healthy number. I don't know where else you can get that kind of percentage on a continuing basis. On a continuing basis for the rest of your life, you'll get that number, $8,640. Keep that in mind. That's very important. And that's at 70. Now, if you're a little younger than 70, it's slightly less. If you're older than 70, it'll be more. But that's a good number to think about. 70 is a good age to look at. If you want to hear or see the continuing new offers as they come out, new products as they come out, new bonuses as they come out, you can call the office here, 410-902-0464, and we'll put you on our mailing list. So you'll get on a continuing basis, you'll see what we're doing and what's new and, so forth and so on. So that's that. And I want to tell you again, now here's another one. If you're 65, this is a little ad we run. We mail it out. We mail this out on a regular basis and with new ideas and so forth and so on, and by zip code. So we vary the zip codes month to month. So in this instance, if you're 65 years old, you can get 7% for life. So that's a number you want to keep in mind. These are all good numbers. And so give us a call. Ask us what's going on. There's always a new offering coming out. These have a time limit. They can change their mind. The companies, the carriers, the insurance companies. We only work with the best. We look for A-rated companies. We know who they are. We've worked with many of them for a very long time. And I hope you'll give us a call and see what we can do for you. This is an opportunity for you. And I love talking to folks. And I want you to listen to and watch our show, every week. Look at our podcasts. And you're going to learn some things. At the very least, you'll learn some things. And I'd love to meet with you. So give me a call, 410-902-0464. Thanks very much. Talk to you next week. Hi, folks. Good to be with you again. Carrying on from last week, Mike Newmeyer here, financial advisor. We're talking about retirement. That's our subject. That's my wheelhouse, is retirement. And how to get and what to get to pay for your retirement. So that's what we're basically talking about. But I've made a list of things, items that I think that you ought to think about. And of course, the beginning of the issue is, are you going to pull the trigger in 2025? Are you actually going to retire? Or are you going to retire later? But if you're going to start to think about retiring in 25, what have you done to prepare for it? Because planning is the essential issue. We always tell everybody, if you don't plan, you're not prepared. And procrastinating is not preparation. It's easy to procrastinate. The problem is that if you do that, you're really not going to be ready to retire. So that's the first thoughts that I have for you. How do you think about money and aging now? And believe it or not, I'll say to people, how long are you going to live? They look at me like, deers in the headlight, but a lot of people have an idea, of how long you're going to live. Now, they may be wrong. They may be wrong. Typically, you got to plan for longer than you think you're going to live. You've got a spouse maybe, and you got to think of both of you. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not going to live that long so I can spend more and so use up my resources. But that's not necessarily the wisest thing to do. The last thing you want to do, as my dad would say years ago, is you don't want to end up in the poorhouse. You don't want to be, eating cat food. This is not what it's about. This is not a happy state. So overspending early on in retirement can have very negative results. So you think about, aging and how long you're going to live and what's your health all about. Have you been to a doctor lately? You need to go to a doctor and say, hey, look, I'm planning to retire. Tell me what the score is. How's the vitals? How's my heart? Are there any other things? Now, you may know of other things. So he has something, of course, there to work with, and he has your history. You want to have an appraisal, an inventory of your health conditions so that you can plan realistically. And how about your spouse? Same issues there. Just planning based on a retirement age and pensions and Social Security and things like that are not adequate, because really and truly you got to know the other issues before you can make real plans. Okay, so those are a couple of thoughts. Do you have 3 pots of money? 3 pots of money. Do you have money for today? Okay, to pay your bills on a regular basis. Now remember that if you look at the consumer price index, the changes that have taken place, and I have that here somewhere, but the thing is that every year we've seen that utilities are more expensive and lots of other things. We know we've had 21% overall inflation in the last several years. I expect that to come down. I expect us to get inflation coming down in itself isn't the answer. It's the prices that have to come down. Inflation right now is lower than it was last year, but gee whiz, we're up 21% or 20% in prices. If you go to the grocery store, you know that. So it's not the inflation rate. So instead of maybe having 5-6% inflation this year, maybe it's only going to be 3%, but that's on top of the prices having gone up 20% in the last 4 years. So we know that things continue to increase. I can say this with pretty solid evidence that in reality, probably your taxes are not, your federal taxes are not going to go up this year as far as rates are concerned. Now, we've had a relief when we got the tax reductions a few years ago. I think they will be extended. I'm convinced this Congress that's coming absolutely wants to. And our new president wants to. He's determined to extend the tax cuts that he initiated. So I do believe that that's going to take place. So we don't have to worry too much about federal taxes going up. Now, if you live in Maryland, the question is, what's going to happen to the state taxes? And the jury's still out. I don't know, really, okay? It's sort of anybody's guess except the people there that actually know in Annapolis what possibilities are. So, you got to think about all those things. And so the 3 pots of money, today's money, and then the emergency money that you're holding aside to take care of those things that come up that you cannot anticipate. In the market and in overall financial world, we say the black swan that's out there somewhere that's going to show up. There's always a surprise. You remember in 2007, 8, 9, when we had the Great Recession, to me it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. We never anticipated that. We had the collapsing of the banks and so forth. We have to survive and prosper no matter what. And then particularly if we're in retirement. We have to have money set up for emergencies, big emergencies and small emergencies. What if your dishwasher goes up? Are you ready to take care of that? Or a refrigerator or something of that nature, or your roof has to be replaced. So are you putting money aside on a regular basis to take care of the emergencies so they don't disrupt your overall financial plan. That's a good idea. And then how are you going to pay for your retirement? What's going into it? Because in retirement, income and expenses, those are the things you have to deal with. Now the expenses ought to be routine expenses. Maybe your utilities are going to go down because you're going to downsize. Maybe you're going to move to a state where the taxes are different, or there's no state taxes. You need to consider those things. But I always say plan for the worst case scenario. Plan for costs not going down in general. And plan for a couple percent inflation. Be aware that it's coming. Don't all of a sudden have to disrupt your life and make drastic changes because you didn't plan. Some people do that. And that's a sad state of affairs. Okay, so those are some things to think about. What about health care in general? You get to be 65, you got Medicare. That's great. But Medicare only pays for about 80% of your health expenses, your medical expenses. So we say there's a donut hole there. It's not covered. Now there you need supplements. And the best way to approach it from my perspective, from looking at what lots of people have done and what I've done, is Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage envelops the whole picture to such an extent that it covers most of the additional costs that would be covered by any supplement. But the whole thing about it is that it's bound together with Medicare. So hopefully you can experience some actual savings. You should look at Medicare Advantage when you're making a decision about the supplements. Now, there's a lot of plans that have Medicare Advantage, and we're hearing about it all the time now on television and so forth. Aging population is taking senior issues very seriously. So we're talking about those things. We're hearing about those things more and more on television and radio and so forth, and on social media. Social media is not just adolescents. Social media is all ages today. There's a lot of information out there that's available. And if you want to talk about any of these things, I am always available. You can call me. You can look at our website, you get all our information, Game Plan for Retirement, or you can call me at 410-902-0464, and we'll repeat that a number of times, on our broadcast. 410-902-0464, and it's not like that I'm going to charge you for time. In fact, you can come and visit me, and I don't charge anybody for time. I will reserve an hour at no cost to you if you want to come in and just talk about your situation. And I can give you an informal appraisal evaluation of what you're basically looking at and make some general recommendations. And then if you want to put together a plan, I do that for my clients at absolutely no cost. So those are things you may want to think about. Just give me a call. I'd love to talk to you. I love to talk to people. And I love to solve problems and help people do better. So those are some things to think about. What about Social Security? Let me say this first on Social Security. We get COLAs, cost of living adjustments, on Social Security. They may or may not be every year. And they're not necessarily larger or stay at 5%. Or we had one at 5%. That was a pretty good increase a few years ago. It may be 2%. It may be 3%. You can't really count on the number. Okay, you can't count on the percentage. But you typically will get some kind of an incremental increase in your Social Security income, on an annual basis. They may skip a year. They may not skip a year. If inflation actually reverses itself, and we get rid of the higher prices, of course that could mean there wouldn't be any COLAs during those years. But it's got a long ways to go to get down to that. We got 20% more expensive food and all the necessaries at this time. So we're probably going to see those COLAs for some time in the near future. Now, when do you want to start Social Security? That's the most often asked questions. Let me give you a couple of the key things to think about, okay? First, if you are really going to retire at 62, if you're really going to retire and you're not going to work at all, okay, then starting Social Security at 62 makes sense, okay? If you're going to work a little bit, then starting it at 62 also makes sense, Okay, if you're going to continue to work full time, then it doesn't make sense to start Social Security until you get past your full benefit year, and that varies by individual. So what's the smartest first thing to do? Go on ss.gov and open an account where you can get personal information and you can look at different graphs and indicators that'll tell you how much you'll get at different ages. Okay, but on top of that, I would go to the Social Security office and I would try to pick out the person that is the most experienced, who's been there the longest, because they're the ones that are on top of the constant changes that are taking place in Medicare and in Social Security. People will tell me that they got the handbook for 2024 or 2025 on Medicare. But I want to tell you something. Those handbooks are very confusing, very confusing. A lot of legalese, and they're not short. They're long. There's an awful lot of information. They're so great if you're willing to study it and understand the different choices and all the topics that are covered. But you may want to also have the person at Social Security answer questions. Maybe the right way to do it on Medicare is to look through the handbook, find topics that you want more information on, underline those, take the book with you when you go to Social Security and ask the individual. You can go online also on Medicare, and they'll have frequently asked questions and answers to those too. So you can kind of educate yourself. But I think that it's always worthwhile to contact the expert at the Social Security office. So those are some ideas on those things. I wrote a note here. What about making your plan for the long term or longevity? In other words, if you're going to be around for a while, don't make a plan that's really only covering the first 10 years. A lot of people do that. They plan things out for 10 years, but it's like dropping off a cliff after that. They haven't really considered the future after that point. So you want to make a plan. It's not going to be every year is the same. It won't be that, because you may make changes in your life. As you get older, ultimately, you're going to go to assisted living or something like that. I hate to think about it, but that's where we're going to end up if we're lucky. Okay, or we're going to have home health care. And home health care is a whole different proposition. You have to think about the costs there and versus the assisted living. You can go into a lifetime facility where you can live, and as your needs change, you can have those needs met. And so those are a lot of there's a lot of choices out there, and there's a lot of material available online. And I'll be happy to share some of the material with you when you come in to see me. Remember, I don't charge for my time. And if you come in and become a client, of course, I'm willing to spend any amount of time with you to help you plan these things. And we can do it, a couple comes in. I've even had families come in, adult children along with their parents and so forth and so on. Depends on how many people you want involved in your business. And we also supply our clients with a book where you can document all of your assets and all of the information that somebody in your family would need in an emergency to act on your behalf. That would accompany a durable power of attorney, which would allow them to act, in your behalf if you're unable to act on your own. So those are some things to be aware of, and we like helping people, especially when they need help. We want to help them. Okay, I already mentioned the Social Security issues and choices. So I just say this: be smart about your choices. Don't jump to any conclusion. Take your time. Before you think you're going to start Social Security, follow the steps I've outlined. Open up an account on ss.gov, study everything you can see there that makes sense, write down the questions you have, go to the Social Security office, talk to an experienced person. I always say, look for the oldest person there, the person that's worked the longest, because they watch it evolve. They know what the exceptions are. You're not going to get canned actions or canned answers. So that's a thought along that. What are you going to do for income besides Social Security? Maybe you have a pension, or maybe you have a 401k. Okay, you got to figure where the income is going to come from. Income doesn't automatically come from a 401k. Oh, you could take the interest each year. You could take that out if you wanted to. But the reality is, the real way to approach it is to understand, first of all, if you've got a 401k and it's still in the market, if it's still in the market, that money may or may not be what it is today down the road. And I've seen many people make the mistake of putting the money in the market and draw out a certain amount of money every month. That's fine when the market's going up. But all of a sudden, when the market goes down and you continue to take that amount every month, that's hurting. You're never going to make up that money when the market's going down. So you're never going to be able. It's going to have more of an effect on you if you maintain that same withdrawal rate. It's going to have more of an effect on you than you'd imagine. I've seen people run out of money. Now that's something you don't want to do. So doing it that way, to me, makes no sense. Now the go-to product category today for retirement is annuities. They're wonderful. It used to be annuities had questionable reputation, but today the modern annuities behave like a pension, and that's what I deal in. You could say it's a private pension. That incidentally, Social Security is a pension. It is a pension. It's built on the same basis that other annuities are. So if you come and see me, when you're ready to have security, I can get you annuity income that can never change. Will always be there, guaranteed. It's insured. You've got the right approach. If you come and see me, I'll show you how much you can get. If you roll over a 401k or the like, here's the dollars that you'll be able to receive. I'll show you that, and you can do it so that your spouse will receive the same income if something happens to you, God forbid. So those are very worthwhile considering. Got to look at everything. Where are we going to get our money? Is it coming from Social Security? Is it coming from rental property? Is it coming from these kinds of annuities, which will always be, that income is guaranteed. You're going to get that. You're going to get that. If you're worrying about Social Security, I would say don't worry too much. Don't worry too much. That's one of the most important things in the budget. Okay, entitlement programs, Social Security, disability, various things. Okay, they're going to take care of first and foremost. And if we get the cuts in government spending that they're working on, or going to be working on, that's going to help ensure Social Security. Yes, the Social Security fund is down, but we can put money into it. And if we stop spending wasteful money, we'll have a lot more money to put into it. I anticipate that is going to happen in the next few years. So I wouldn't be too concerned about Social Security. If things hadn't changed, if things weren't changing, I'd have a lot more concern. But remember this too, those guys in Washington, they want to keep their jobs. And they know that back home, those people that they represent don't want to see anything happen to Social Security. And if those people see that their representatives are not taking care of them, then they don't have a great chance of getting reelected. So you've got that going for you also. Well, what about real estate? What about selling real estate or buying real estate? Well, let me give you this first idea that interest rates are what drive sales and purchases. So right now, interest rates are high, but they are coming down a little bit, but they may be going back up. We don't know. If we start to see more inflation, they probably will raise the rates because that's what they use to fight inflation. If inflation looks like we're getting rid of the inflation, then you'll see rates go down. And if rates go down, that's a real good time to think about buying or selling, obviously. But sometimes you got to do it, even when the rates are up, because that's just the circumstances. Maybe you have to downsize because your budget says you got to downsize, or you don't want to keep taking care of the old homestead. So it's time to really look at downsizing. Maybe your kids are in South Carolina and you're in Baltimore and you want to be around your kids. Well, it's less expensive generally in South Carolina, so that may be a good move financially. What if you have a 2-story house now and physically you don't want to deal with that long term? And I'm amazed that people that are relatively young feel that way. Okay? They don't want to have to deal with all that. They don't want to have to accommodate, additional issues than they would have if they just had a flat one story, rancher kind of situation. And maybe they don't need as big a house because the kids are all grown. So those are considerations, obviously. And there's some very, very good realtors in Baltimore. Very good, very good. So keep that in mind. That, if you want a name, call me and I'll give you a good name on a realtor. So those are some things on real estate. And what about life insurance? It's interesting because you hear these ads all the time that you can sell your life insurance if you don't need it anymore. If you don't need it anymore, got to think about whether you need it anymore, because life insurance can serve a lot of purposes. For instance, if you've got permanent life insurance, you may have been accumulating cash values in it. You can take the cash values out of it and take it out tax-free. You can use that money to do a lot of different things. And they can actually help you fund your retirement. You can take money out and put it into an annuity that gives you lifetime income. And I've had lots of folks do that through the years. So that's one strategy. And then, but what about selling your life insurance? You can sell even term insurance today. You may not get much. You have to talk to one of these companies that buy life insurance. And some of them don't pay very much. But it doesn't hurt anybody to just ask the question. So those are some thoughts, and we're going to keep on giving you tips and so forth. So please think about these things, and how many? Hey folks, this is not one of the most popular topics, but I want to insert this to make you aware of, if you're not already aware of, some of the things you need to think about as far as estate planning. Okay, dying without a will. That's intestate. That means you die without a will. And the disadvantages are you lose control over the expense. I made some notes here. I'm going to look back at them. You lose control over the expense and time frame of estate distributions. Your estate may incur taxes and expenses that could have been avoided. So that's a big deal. Now your accountant, your tax accountant, can explain that to you if you want more information. No problem. You probably can find information also online by just putting the topic in. There's probably a lot of information. So you can just wills and no will, and I'm sure it'll bring up a lot of information for you. Your estate may experience delays and a shortage of liquid assets to pay estate taxes. And those are due within 9 months in Maryland. So keep that in mind. So there are obviously disadvantages. And also, a will may not be enough. A will is an important legal document. It's your will, what you want to take place. You, the testator, you're the testator. That's the name I always have to remember that they used to talk about the person that is actually writing the will. Okay, so you're the testator or testatrix. These are great words, great testatrix. Should provide instructions for the distribution of your estate upon your death, and testamentary, meaning after you're gone, and appoint a person who's an executor or executrix, great words, or personal representative to administer your estate. Now, you ought to have somebody in mind ahead of time, and that person ought to know what's going on. And they should know what you mean when you say what you say in your will. So those are some ideas there on the wills. And this is my notebook that I've used for years. Sometimes I can't even get the pages apart. But anyway, also, the advantages of a will again. Although a will by itself may not create the most effective estate plan, it does offer many advantages listed below. 1, you select a person, again, as an executor. You indicate the persons or organizations that are beneficiaries. So if you want to leave money to a church or a temple, you want to indicate all those things. A good estate attorney will guide you through these things. People will say, well, I did a will, I got a will online or something. And I'm sure some of those are just fine for certain people. Personally, I wouldn't do that. I think having a good estate attorney that's able to guide you so that you cover what you need to cover, and then you have to update it. You don't leave it alone. It isn't something that you do once and forget about it. You've got to review it, and I'd say probably every 3 years. And if you're working with an estate attorney who's going to retire, you need to know that, and you need to have a recommendation on somebody else to work with if they're gone or if they retire. Okay. So those are some ideas as far as the wills are concerned. And keep in mind that you can change beneficiaries, you can change the content of a will, cost you to do it. Minor changes don't cost much, but you may decide that you want to leave more or less to different people and so forth. You may exclude people. I've seen wills that excluded children from a prior marriage. I've seen all kinds of things done like that. You're not obligated to leave the money to anybody, okay? Unless by earlier contracts. For instance, if you had a divorce, and in that divorce contract and that settlement, it said that you were going to leave a certain amount of money or certain property or whatever to your former spouse, then of course that has to be included in the will, or it'll override the will. You want the will to be as complete as possible. When it goes to the orphans court, that's where we probate wills. Okay. Now, incidentally, you can avoid probate on many assets by simply having transfer on death, okay, built into it, or having a named beneficiary built into it. So in our annuities, for instance, you got a named beneficiary; they become the owner immediately. If you have a transfer on death agreement written into a loan, or not a loan, but a contract at a bank, anything like that, then immediately upon your passing, it becomes theirs. So those are some ideas. I'm going to give you a lot more ideas later on, but I just want to give you a little bit of a taste as far as estate planning. There's a lot more to it, and we will cover it at a future time.